Steven Espinoza, the president of Showtime Sports. Steven, thank you so much for joining us today. I wanted to talk to you because you, more than anyone else, really made this fight happen. You really brought Canelo Alvarez to Showtime. And now that you're here, there's a lot of questions about, are you going to be able to pay, make money off of this with all the money you have to pay to Canelo and everything else that's going on? Can you talk us through this a little bit? And I mean, how are things trending? Are you very happy that everything you envisioned is being realized?
So, there's always risk in this current market, and especially when on an event like this, where Canelo sort of took a free agent approach and sort of shopped around, looked at different fights. There were multiple bidders in here, so there wasn't a pretty aggressive process to land the fight financially. Having said that, there are certainly fights that, not just Canelo, but if we go back over the last 3 or 4 years, there are fights where we've sort of opted out, where we've said, okay, this is where we're comfortable financially, and, there are others who view it differently, and more power to them, but for our business, this is where we draw the line. Canelo, thankfully, we were able to get it done, where there is certainly risk, but it's an acceptable amount of risk and a reasonable amount of risk. And when you take it, loop it into the big picture, there's non-financial benefits as well. So even if we break even on this event, this is one of those things, having the number one fighter in the sport on your network and associated with your boxing platform. We saw it with Floyd. It brings more attention and credibility and marketing value. We'll be marketing a lot of other fights during this fight, and using it to drive value for the network. So yes, there is risk. Not enough that I'll be awake all night on Friday night, refreshing the buys. But look, at this point, there are some good indicators. The gate is very healthy. I mean, I think they're on track for, somewhere between 15 to 20 million.
I heard 20 million.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 20 than 15.
Okay.
And I know there's been a lot of discussion, about, UFC versus boxing on this weekend and all that. Look, I think it's worth noting, Canelo, and this won't be Canelo's biggest gate, but this gate will be bigger than any UFC gate there's been in history. And I think that there is a lot of indicators that whether there's competition with boxing or NFL or college football, an event like this draws. I mean, he is the number one fighter in the sport.
Absolutely.
So we have some indicators, very few. We can track digital buys and track them against prior events. And at this very early stage, we're sitting here on Thursday afternoon. We're ahead or on par with everything we've done this year, which includes Mayweather and Logan Paul.
Wow.
Now it's early. We don't. I'm not going to say that it means a lot because we're talking about a few thousand buys.
Yeah.
But it certainly, tells us optimistic. If I look at things like, how is the viewership trends on the All Access, on the social media, who's tuning into the live streams, and how many, all those things are, very positive. So, you never know until we get to Saturday night and people push the button to buy.
Yeah.
But we're very comfortable where we are now.
I was talking to someone yesterday, and they made the point that it is a great unknown because Canelo took himself off of pay-per-view by fighting on DAZN. And did all of those fans who went to DAZN, are they just Canelo fans now? Does he still have the power to bring 1 million plus, buys to your fight?
Right.
Do you think he harmed himself in any way by being with DAZN? And are you worried at all about any kind of fall off in popularity or viewership?
I don't think in terms of popularity, because his performances has been strong. He's still, a huge figure, particularly throughout Latin America and with the Latino audience here in the U.S. But, I do think, and I'm hardly objective in this, I do think that, being on a nascent platform, one that was just getting established, didn't give his events quite the visibility that they've had with other established platforms like ours. That's just my personal opinion. And so I think one of the things that brought him back to us was some of the non-financial, was sort of our credibility, our reputation in the sport, our proven ability to reach a mass market and reach not just hardcore boxing fans, but mainstream consumers who might buy 1 or 2 fights a year. And I think that's one of the things you lose with a pure streaming service, is you're talking to your very fertile ground, pure sports customers, but you don't always get the ability to bring in that person who is watching 1 or 2 fights a year.
Yeah.
They're not going to be typically a sports service subscriber. You need to reach them on their other platforms, and that's where Viacom CBS and Showtime in particular really helps.
And you're also in very strong position. I mean, basically, David Benavidez, who fights next week with you guys, and then following that, a guy like Jermall Charlo, who has fought for your network, are potential Canelo Alvarez opponents. So you're in great position. I'm sure you considered all that in pursuing this fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Canelo is a free agent. He's making 1-fight deals, and he wants to retain flexibility. But we wouldn't have made this a deal if we didn't see a path forward in the future. If it was sort of like he's coming in and out, might not be as interested. Now, we don't have a commitment that he'll be there, but we've certainly had discussions, and I think he's open to it, and that's what we need to hear. And in terms of in Benavidez in particular, we slotted him on the 13th, in the hopes, crossing our fingers that we could pair it with Canelo, because not just from marketing David and marketing a future opponent, but we've always said that one of the elements of what we're trying to do here is making fights make sense.
Yeah.
And so if we have, this week we have Canelo and next week we have one of his top opponents, it makes boxing make sense a little bit more to see that conversation continuing. We're talking about 168 pounders this week. We'll be talking about 168 pounders next week. And so it's not just, hey, is he a future pay-per-view opponent, but let's try to bring some order and organization to the sport.
Great. I guess last thing actually is, I'm not a mathematician, I'm not a businessman like you, but I think in crunching the numbers, it seems as if you can get the 500,000 buys on this fight, you've made your money.
Yeah, that's a pretty good ballpark, and look, you're absolutely right. There's risk. Canelo hasn't been on pay-per-view since Golovkin. TV market has changed a lot since then, just on how people buy and piracy and things like that. So, but we're comfortable with the amount of risk. I mean, it's not going to take 2 million, 3, 4 million buys for us to break even. But it is, it's a deal that makes sense, obviously, for Canelo, and it's a deal where it makes sense for us as well.
Good luck. Thank you so much for your time, Stephen.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.